Nkosi Sikilele Africa Malopakane Sopandoayo Israel Metando Zoye Tu Nkosi Sikilele. Welcome again, as we say in call and response. Habari Manchana, Habari Asubuhi. This is another episode of It Is Our Duty. We are grateful that you've come to join in with us on our weekly Sunday evening 60-minute show to bring about a virtual broadcast for the Black radical tradition. We are the parable of the Sower Intentional Community Cooperative. I am one of the members. My name is Alita Torre, and I am the host for this show. The Black radical tradition is important to our cooperative because as a parable of the Sower Intentional Community Cooperative, as a worker-owned cooperative, we center political education. We center the Rochdale Principals of a cooperative, which deals with we cannot exist, will not be able to trust in a worker-owned setting. We will not be able to live together, will not be able to grow together in a trust mechanism dealing with an anonymity unless we steer political education, unless we continuously have this as our center. As organizers, we found it very important for us to have this show in this place where we are preparing for our next move with this show, which will be on land, which will be with the cooperative members and their families and the organizations around the country that will join in with us as non-cooperative members and just as folks who want to learn the beloved community ways to bring back the motherland's village. And so this is how we have steered this conversation to bring back this reminder that it's one thing to work in community, to go to church on Sunday, which is one day a week, right? It's one thing to have retreats, right? That's usually 2 or 3 days a week. It's another thing to go to a conference, right? And it's maybe 7 days a week you can go, right? You fly somewhere or you have it on Zoom. But when you have a mechanism of getting in and centering the this mechanism called the what do we call it again? We call it political education in a framework that says you have to do it more than that. You have to be able to, and I'm trying to get this next thing in here. Let's see. We have to be able to do more than every now and then political education at a retreat, as we said, at a town hall meeting. One of the things that we're going to talk about today, more than which is the faults of this not being clear and needy for each other, beloved community, 9-to-5 jobs, funding through nonprofits only allow those workers to have their office hours in certain hours. Schools only allow it the school time. But this thing that brings about Black disposability, couldn't get the word out. Black disposability politics happens, and that is because we haven't centered to be near each other often. We do have a guest with us. Let's see. So there we are. So we do have our guest with us today to talk about some of these things, and she's going to share in with us in a second. Just glad that she is here. She is also one of our cooperative members. She will be joining us to talk about these topics today, Black disposability politics, and also the anniversary today of the Tulsa, Oklahoma. What do we call it? Tulsa, Oklahoma massacre, right? And so we're going to be able to really join in and have this conversation with you all about what does it mean to steer in Black disposability politics. Why is that happening? And why are we having a hard time with 100 years of this Tulsa, Oklahoma tragedy? So the Tulsa, Oklahoma tragedy stems from something that has a lot to do with the the um, the centering and the unreckoning from the state, from the trauma of this country that we live in, but also something that we have to own ourselves when we say we're learning political education as a Black radical tradition. And that is how we dispose of each other. How the nonprofit system, as I just mentioned, only allows us to do so much in a day. If you're not well, as they say, mentally illness and what have you, what happens? We get rid of those people, the poor, the blighted, the ones that haven't finished their education, the ones that are in prison. We allow ourselves to say nonprofit money can come to us. We can grab this money, and only the ones that have been educated the most, the ones that savvy enough can work this movement. And we put them in the place to say, yes, y'all can walk the streets, do the marching and the demonstrations, but no, you cannot be in this place of the leadership. And that's where we forget and neglect this thing called the beloved community, this thing called what Villages of the Motherland was like, because we did not let anyone fall to the wayside. Everyone was important. And in our movements, we showed that we needed each other, not when we were just good and savvy and had enough energy, but even when we needed respite. In the villages, we took care of each other. We say, okay, it's your turn to sit down. Elders would say, okay, we've got medicine for you. Okay, warriors, y'all hurt, you bruised, we still have you. No one left the village. And so there is a notion on what our responsibility is in this wake of Tulsa, Oklahoma, after the 100th. And we'll go through that. And also the state's responsibility. And we call that something that you all will understand once we get our guests who's going to be in here with us. We're trying to get more of our cooperative members on this process with you. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce her now. So excited. And we have none other than Miss Yehudith Torre. Hello, good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. Thank you
Hi.
for having me.
Anytime. This is your show. You're also a part of the Purable the Sower Cooperative. Tell us a little about yourself, Yehudith. I want to say Yaya because that's what I call you, right? But tell me about yourself in this place you are in, because we're about to go into talking about Tulsa today. Tulsa, Oklahoma, as in the Black Wall Street.
Okay, great. Yes, and everybody on here is family to me. If we're all fighting for the same goal, so Yaya Yehudith, that is my name, and I am a member of the Parable of the Sower Co-op, and also a aspiring chef. Currently, I consider myself a cook because looking to get
Yes.
promoted.
We already know who's in charge of the land when we have it. The chefs, of course, because they feed the people. So we're excited. So tell us more about this. What your endeavors are in this, especially now since COVID. How has this evolved into this knowledge that your heart has always been to feed the people?
Okay, so I don't know if any of you guys know that are on here, but Alita Torre is my mother. I don't call her by her first name. It's mama to me, but that's my mother. And, she has, since I think I was born, before I was born, instilled a faith in our people and towards a greater cause of healing others and advocating for social and civil justice. And so by default, and as well as my father, he's also involved in those causes, and he is also passionate about the people. So by default, with my parents, I am also very geared towards, being just a vessel and a solution to the problem. So as a future chef, I am looking to, reach out to the community and with homelessness, and hopefully teach others, about healthy eating, and also just about regular cooking, and the homeless population. I'm really passionate about, being a part of, helping ending homelessness, and also helping them gain the knowledge to help them get careers or jobs, to put them in a situation where they need to be. And so, as far as how that connects with the co-op, like my mom said, or like as Sower said, you're gonna need cooks, because people have to eat. So we're going to be on the land, and so we're going to be growing our own crops and vegetables. And
Yeah.
so I've started my own little mini garden, and so I'm already learning about how we can use those vegetables and fruits to like grow off the land to eat better.
Yes, and like I always think of this is that, hey, one day, right? I'm glad to have you to carry this on, right? I always say, where can I do this work where I'm not needed anymore? Not so much that I don't want to be there, but I know it's in hands. And then how great grandma was and grandma was and all our family is just passing that baton. And so thank you for fixing too. Your screen was jumping a little bit, so it looks like you fixed.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. It's probably because I was moving.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so as you hear, I call her Yaya. Yes, she is my daughter, but she is the youngest member of the Parable of the Sower Intentional Community Cooperative. Not that we won't have non-cooperative members that will be on the land, and our families, they will also be on the land. It's that she is in one of the worker-owned, and that first round of worker-owned cooperative members are the ones that make a lot of the moves and decisions based on the Rochdale Principles. So thank you for bringing into that this conversation, Yaya, about food and healthy eating and how we plan to grow and how everyone after mutual aid, right, is ready to steer the importance of how much we've been cooking and how much weight I gained 50 pounds. Y'all know how visible I am. 50 pounds I've gained, but it's because I was trying new recipes, and Yaya knows I love to cook, and I love to cook for people. And so sometimes just me making a dish and passing it to someone that I know that needed it, like the monks. I practice mindfulness and meditation. And so going to cook for them, oh my gosh, it's been amazing. And to know eventually that we will have that land and we'll be steering that for the homeless and for people that need it, it warms my heart because it's a part of the tradition that I knew that always needed to be here when we say parable of the sower, including. So I'm thankful for that. And so this conversation is kind of connected. Yeah. So it's almost like what we do in this is just let's look at these screens. I'm going to start off with this one. So this is Tulsa, Oklahoma. Right. And this screen shows just it says Oklahoma 1921. Right? The property value for today would have been $610 million. We like to give facts in this Black Radical Tradition show. It is our duty, because it is our duty that we're not going to get this education in the schools. And so, Yaya, what did you think about this whole centennial? As far as it being the 100th, and then the president went there, and here's the lady who is the oldest woman that was there that day when she was young. I think she's 107 or something like that. What did you think about this whole factor that we are right now in the centennial of this massacre? Can
So it's funny that, and I just wanted to hear you again. You were talking about a woman, and you said she was.
Yeah, she's in that middle picture. I have a better picture of her, but she is the one that with the afro right there, the elderly woman sitting down in the wheelchair. She went to the Washington D.C. and said, "Look, I was there that day. I remember what happened, and it is so very tragic that that day will always be in my mind. Here I am, the later part of my life." And it has traumatized me, right? When we talk about Dr. Joy and the Black trauma of PTSD, post traumatic slave disorder, she is the example of what happened in 1921. She was a little girl and she was one of the survivors who said that she still remembers that day. That day has still traumatized her. But we had her, thank God, we brought her to the state that was responsible for this tragedy and massacre.
Right. Yes. So I'm glad that, thank you for clarifying that for me, because it's crazy. Like, there's no coincidences, as they say, because I just made a post about Olivia Hooker, and she passed, like you said, she was over 100 years old, and she passed in November of 2018.
Mm,
And God bless her. So, I don't even want to say unfortunately, because that's a beautiful age to live to. Like, we all wish we could get to 100 years, right? So,
right.
like, she is inspiring. And like you said, she was in Washington D.C., and I also found out that that's where she was a part of the U.S. Coastal Guard. So, and that's not even the craziest thing. Not only was she part of the U.S. Coastal Guard, and also a professor and a psychologist, but she was the first Black woman to become a part of the U.S. Coastal Guard. And that is just like, we are so resilient. Like, so the reason I bring that up, besides the fact that you addressed it, is because, like, as far as the COVID crisis and like how it's affected Black and brown people, it we it seems like we are targeted for these kinds of diseases, right?
Right.
And the in the 100th year anniversary of the Tulsa, some call it the Tulsa race riot or the Tulsa race massacre, the massacre that
Both.
happened, right? It's all that. So, in the anniversary of it, nothing has changed.
Right.
So, you know,
Exactly.
looking at some information on how Black people are, and I'm about to say allegedly, um, disproportionately affected by COVID and disproportionately dying by COVID.
Mm,
You know, you see that it's the same thing going on. And the reason I
right.
said allegedly was because I also heard that allegedly they are or have been recording hospital deaths that are not related to COVID as COVID deaths, right? And so I'm not a part, thank God I'm not a part of the powers that be that run this world, but whatever their agenda is, it is not meant to benefit us at all. So if
Mm,
that hearsay is true, and that they have been recording people passing in hospitals, and not only recording the passings of Black and brown people in
uh,
poor and low income neighborhoods as COVID deaths, but
mhm.
performing operations that work against the health of those people in those hospitals, right? So that's
Mm,
hearsay allegedly, right? But
right.
we don't even have to talk about alleged claims, because we have evidence of other claims where they don't care about our lives in the hospitals. Women,
Right.
Black women in the hospitals, dying of childbirth, and it's it's a beautiful thing. It's a hurtful thing what we're going through in this country, but it's beautiful
Yes.
because our eyes as a whole have been opening more
Okay.
and more. I don't.
No. Yes, and that brings us right to this point, because the whole thing is, a lot of us have kept the what is it, the third eye closed, right? And you know how mama is. It's about, where are we not seeing? How are we now being able to see what we, a lot of people have already known? And that's why this is called Black radical tradition. So on that right there, I'm going to show you something, because I know you know about this, because we've talked about it. But this is about what you're saying. The numbers are going to prove. Us having the cameras on are going to prove. Our internet, being so diverse now with our facts and databases, are also improved. So here is something in going to those numbers, because I'm glad you talked about now and the people that have passed, because it all goes back to this. One of the reasons. Do you remember? Can you read this last part on the screen if you can see it?
Yeah, let me put my glasses back on.
With my glasses too.
Yeah.
Between German reparations.
Okay. So it says between 1999 and 1932,
Mm-hmm.
Germany paid less than 21 billion marks in reparations. The German people, and it's, I'm not,
Reparation as a national humiliation.
the German people reparations as a national humiliation. The German government worked to undermine the validity of the Treaty of Versailles and the requirement to pay.
Yes, so that's World War I. In this little section in the middle, underneath that picture, it says reparations World War II. After World War II, according to the Potsdam Conference held between July 17th and August 2nd, 1945, Germany was to pay to allies and the U.S. $23 billion,
Mm.
mainly machinery and manufacturing plants. But the reparations of the Soviet Union stopped in 1953, right? Which meant they went on for a while, and large numbers of factories were dismantled or destroyed. So there was reparations, right? Let's say that word. Can you say reparations? Yeah, yeah.
Reparations, amen.
So now read this next one that you see here. What does that one? And I realized, yes, read the next one that here on the top, where it says September 11th Victim Compensation Fund.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, the September 11th Victim Compensation Fund has launched a new website. For more information about the fund, please go to www.vcf.gov. And about, you want me to read the rest?
Yeah.
Okay. About the September 11th Victim Compensation Fund, the the September 11th Victim Compensation Fund, VCF, was created to provide compensation for any individual or a personal representative of a deceased individual who suffered physical harm or was killed as a result of the terrorist related aircraft crashes of September 11th, 2001, or the debris removal of efforts that took place in the immediate aftermath of those crashes. The original VCF operated from 2001 to 2004.
So that was 3 years they had this fund. So 11 terrorist attacks moved from being a temporary program to a permanent one. And the change to the September 11th Victim Compensation Fund was first introduced by President Obama, and then this last number 45. So can we say again, reparations?
Reparations.
Okay, and now can you read this next thing here, where just show, just saying what it is that you see on board here?
It says Iran hostages reparations.
Right. And yeah, I didn't put the whole synopsis, but the Iranian hostage reparations. You do you remember that time period when the Iranian hostages came back? Um, and that was during Carter. And so, can you read what he says on his posters? These papers with this guy in the orange. It
Okay.
says,
And I do feel like I remember it, but I'm not sure. But I
mm-hmm,
know I think I know of this situation. So help me. Why you cannot help me? Fourth year,
right. It
you
was a
can't.
fourth.
You, hmm.
Oh, your glasses are better than mine. So what
Well,
ended
only
up,
your side.
the truth of the matter was the soldier, those that were that were held as hostages in Iran, they were received reparations when they came back. There was this whole thing about that. So let's just say for now, because we're not going to get into the historical facts of it right now, but there's just really a point to make. What is the word that I wanted you to say after the last one we talked about, 9/11?
Reparations.
Reparations. All right. Now, can you read this one for me also?
Yes, ma'am. So it says Japanese American reparations, and then the poster says Japanese America African American advancing.
Yeah, the most something about reparations there. But yeah, but in the center, right, it talks about the Defense Command. And who was that man? Do you know who that man is in the top that top picture? He
Ronald
signed
Reagan.
that is Ronald Reagan. Yeah. So we're talking about, one was Obama. We're talking about the number 45, reparations for. We're talking about all these different presidents realizing that what was the word that we're saying that needs to happen again?
Reparations.
Yes, exactly. You're getting on what I'm trying to say. And so now here we are again, where this total a week ago, let's just say a week ago, last Monday, right? Because Monday is tomorrow. This President Biden went to Tulsa. Yes, he did acknowledge it was horrific, right? But the truth of the matter, if we were to give a figure on what it would have been like right now if Tulsa was still existing, Black Wall Street, the property value says that it would be $610 million. That's how it would be. And so our whole thinking is, if in fact he can go and make an estimate that this has happened, and yes, make an estimate that this was horrific and it shouldn't have happened, where is the word again that should happen for this? What's the word that we keep saying?
Sorry, I was muted. Reparations.
Reparations, yes. And I'm not putting you on trial. I'm just trying to see. So if you can fill me on what I'm trying to say. And so with Tulsa, one of the things, I don't know if you've heard about, can you read this last black piece on the bottom, 250 years?
Yes. 250 years of slavery, 90 years of Jim Crow, 60 years of separate but equal, 35 years of state-sanctioned redlining. Until we reckon with the compounding moral debts of our ancestors, America will never be whole. The case for reparations.
And reparations is needed. HR 40 is something that Senator John Conyers. I think when you were young, we went to a meeting and you sat down like your brother and you do when I'm at all these meetings, and you all got to hear how I was a member of this Cobra group because reparations was what he continually fought for. And all these groups have continually fought for this. And in the center here it says pass or fix HR 40. So now they're saying it needs to be adjusted and fixed, and they want to change things. But the whole truth of the matter is, all those cases, right? Which were the cases that we talked about so far? Can you remember them? One was 9/11.
We talked about the Iran
the hostage
situation. We talked about the Japanese reparations.
Two.
And now we are talking
German. Don't forget the German reparations.
Right, the German reparations.
3. Right. And then we also talked about and so we talked about all those in history where they saw there was no problem to give reparations. I mean, that is then and now. And so our whole thing is, this is still hiding somewhere in wherever, where they're now saying, I think the last words I remember the president and vice president saying is that racism doesn't exist. But yet he goes on Monday and says this is horrific and this is tragic. So for me, our whole thing in this political piece, everyone, for Black radical tradition, is that reparations is due. If in fact we can go through the historical pretense of all these places that all these people, the Japanese, the hostages, the Nana, if they were receiving reparations, and we know the tragedy, then we should also receive that. Now, one of the things, I wanted to mention is that there's this whole thing of $11 trillion. And that's because of the California legislator report that we have for reparations right now, right? And mama's in California, and so the whole thing with that is, okay, that's not enough information because we filed it. And you're trying to say you don't remember these tragedies because the Tulsa was so long ago, and now you said there's one. Did you know that there was 100 massacres around that same time that Tulsa happened?
Really? I did not know that.
100. And
Mm.
so for us, and so one of them, the guy who came, who spoke, he talked about the thriving Black community. It was in North Carolina, and I think they called it Municipal Kodatak or something like that. It was in Wilmington in 1898. And so Tulsa was 1921. There was Wilmington in North Carolina. As you know, as a cooperative, we have that book, that talks about all the cooperatives that exist. But there was 100 massacres, right? And so my whole question is to President Biden: are you going to go to all 100 of those sites and say, yes, this is tragic. Oh my gosh, this shouldn't have happened? When do you decide, just like those legislators that signed for reparations, that 100 massacres is enough proof that reparations is due? So I wanted to hear from you, your generation, right? This is facts. This is what we're doing, right, for political education as a family, but also as a cooperative where we believe in worker owned. Everyone is a part of this. Tell me what your thoughts are on just knowing, which I didn't even know too. So I want to tell you, I just found out last week there was 100 massacres, and they did it purposely. So yeah, let's bring the mic back to you. I'm gonna close this part off right here, and tell me what your thoughts on just that, especially since this is the anniversary of the 100th for Black Wall Street.
Okay. Yes. So, mm,
That's big, huh? That's a
it is
lot.
like 100. Wow. And it shouldn't be surprising, but
Right,
mm,
exactly.
I I saw how as I'm sure you've seen too, with the Stop Asian Hate campaign, and I wish the best for any family who has been targeted for their Asiatic race. And I also saw that they received some type of reparations, and that was legally the government passed the bill that would persecute anybody for any like discrimination against Asians. And like more to your point, we don't have that. And Asians, since I can't recall like the year, but I'm pretty sure it's like the 1940s when Japanese Americans and as like with the reparations that they got, and other Asians came from the east, and um uh, I'm sorry. So yeah, so they came from the east, and I heard a lot about how they were treated unfairly, but there
Right,
was no mass murder, right?
right,
And the so in regards to the Tulsa, um, that was a mass murder, and when I was looking up about Miss Hooker, uh, rest in peace, I saw that another article. I'm looking up this information for
right.
the Tulsa massacre of 1921, and I stumbled upon an article about a murder that happened in 2016. But until I continued reading, I didn't realize it was 2016 because I'm thinking, oh no, this is happening. This was the Tulsa, and they was doing this stuff back in the day, and obviously we know that we're still getting murdered by police and brutality.
Yes.
I didn't realize that this was just recently that
Yeah.
um a man was stopped in Tulsa, Oklahoma, not far at all. I think it was like minutes from
Right.
Greenwood where the massacre happened,
Yeah.
that he was stopped by police, and he was not armed.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't have any weapons on him,
Mm-hmm.
and it was at a stoplight. I can't remember the reason, but um he was stopped by police and they said he was belligerent. right? This is what they told his twin sister at the police department when she came there because somebody called her and told her that her twin brother was murdered by the police. The sheriff first apologized whether or not that was genuine, and then told
Wow.
her that he was belligerent but not armed, and then belligerent but yet they initiated he was the helicopter pilot or whoever in the helicopter was encouraging the police officer to tase this man, and then saying something about he looked violent or he looked,
I think
something to
I
do
heard
with
about
how
it.
they demonize us, the same
Right.
thing, and he
Right.
looked violent or something like that, and
Yes.
so they shoot this man.
Right.
He didn't do anything but be belligerent. That's that they
Right.
always try to make us out to be like, oh, we're so scary looking.
Yeah, we're not able to be victims. Yeah,
Exactly. And
we're
we're
too
not victims, but they victimize us.
strong. Hmm.
And so just thinking about that and how I'm looking at this information like, oh, this is the massacre. It's like, oh, nope. It's just some regular old police
It's
brutality
the
that we do.
same. Exactly.
And it's in Tulsa, not far from Greenwood, right?
Right.
And that man that he was charged, and sometimes they don't get charged, but he was
Mhm.
charged, then acquitted a year later in 2017, a year before Miss Hooker passed, right? And I'm glad that she got to live out the life that she did, but that is unfortunate that she had to even live in the time where that was still going on after what she'd been through. And
Yeah.
she
But not only that, just the families that are still suffering. Meaning there are people so traumatized that they know what happened to their parents. They were around. Some of them kids, some of the people, I don't know if you heard also, were put into a concentration camp who did survive. Right. And guess what? They said, don't ever talk about this. So for all 100 years, there are people that they found out that weren't allowed to talk about this. They knew their families were burnt, killed, stabbed. They knew of all this, and they're not able to talk about it. So what that does is to say, I don't want to interrupt you because I'm gonna get to this other part later. It's exactly what you're saying about it's still happening in a silo, right, in a vacuum, even in the same right next to, as you're saying, in Tulsa. So go ahead and I want to hear more of what you're saying, but I wanted to say not just that lady who was 100, the people that were also there that never got to speak, right?
right,
The unsung heroes that still have been traumatized to live their lives and are victims, just like all these victims of 9/11, the German Holocaust, the Iranian hostage, all of them are victims, but so are these people.
right. Yes, they're all have been hurt in many ways that was not necessary or called for, and they find ways to say that we were provoking, like back to the massacre, when I actually did find the information, the and I'm sure many of you know, including you, Mama, obviously, that it started off with there was a newspaper article calling for, and this is crazy. Even I'm trying not to go off of too many points because this is all stuff that's been running through my mind. But just to be short, the newspaper article called for the hanging of a black man who was, I don't know if it was before he went to jail or while he was in jail, but either way he was in jail. And the so a mob of white people
That's right.
pulled up to the jail cell begging begging for him to die, be hung.
Yeah,
And
taking them right out the jail cell. That's how they used to do it.
right. And so legally, obviously, they say that you can't do that. But so the black people, from what I read, they got armed because
Yeah.
they knew how this crowd and how
How,
the mindset
how it's going to
was.
happen. Right. They,
That's the other thing, Hmm?
yeah, they went down to say, don't kill this boy. They went down to say, look, we're going to, and that made those folks even
Right,
angrier. That's how dare y'all come support him.
right. they
Right.
advocated for his like safety, like as they should. And
Right.
that's why, we have been victimized, like you said, but that's why I say that we're not victims, because
Right.
as they know that we're strong, but they try to make us look weak. And so as much as we've been attacked, we have never been weak. So they went down there for this one man. All of
Yeah.
those people went down there for this one man,
Mhm.
ready. And so I knew about the Tulsa massacre, but I didn't know that it was like gunfights happening and things like that,
Yes.
because like I said, like they try to make us look weak. So I'm thinking, we just getting beat up by these people, but no, they were fighting. And Olivia Hooker's mom, God rest her soul, she she told the police, why don't you go out there and get these people that are out here attacking us? You know what they said? They said, we can't do that. How would we do that? And then she's like, she had her musket, right? Like I said, we're not weak, and this is a woman. She had her musket and she pointed at them like this, this is how we want you to do it, right? But they, oh, how can we do that, right? But these it's 300, over 300 black people were murdered that day, but they can't defend them, right?
Right.
So we had to defend ourselves. And
Right.
8,000 people were made homeless. Over 8,000 people were made homeless
Yeah.
that day.
8,000. Yeah.
But Olivia Hooker still became a psychologist, a professor, right? So, um, as far as our reparations, you know, the movement that you have, Mama, Miss Torre, is
Me.
is
Mama. Okay.
Mama, Mama Torre, right? So it's it's like a way to get our own reparations, because we're not getting those 40 acres and a mule. Like, they just passed this Asian hate bill, but nobody's been accused of any crimes. I'm sure there's some, white people still,
Mhm.
or maybe not, because Miss Hooker was 103 and then she was 6 when the riots happened. But nobody was ever accused of these crimes, so we're
Right.
not getting anything. We're not going to. So we
Yeah.
have
And
to do that for ourselves. And like
uh-huh.
with the parable of the sower, that's like a way to get those
Right.
reparations for ourselves.
And I'm glad you brought that to the key, because the truth is a lot of people were very excited the president went down, but the truth of the matter, what has he done? And that is why in the beginning people last week were so proud of him to say what the facts are that everyone already knows. And it's always like, let's pat him on the back for acknowledging, but it doesn't do anything. And in the mind of my next generation right here, she says we got to take our own reparations. And so that brings me to this point of what they said of de-confederatization. And de-confederatization is to tell the truth, right? We are going to do what we have to do. And we're going to talk about that in a second, because I got the next slide that I want us to see. But the truth of the matter is to the dishonesty story is what Biden did. He instead of keeping the lie that this was caused by the people, their own selves, that a bomb was dropped on the city. Tell the truth. Stop deconfederizing means tell the truth that the losers of the Civil War lost, and that the United Daughters of the Confederacy lost, instead of upholding them. That is why people pull down these monuments and stuff, because we're still telling these lies even now, that even he said, the Biden, that the military had nothing to do with it. Just like the bomb were what they found out was that these bombs that were on Tulsa were the same bombs that were from the government. They may have been transferred to someone, just like bombs are transferred to people all around all these other countries, right? We transfer our bombs and our stuff, and we say, well, that wasn't ours. We gave them those. It's still on your hand. That blood is on your hand. And so it's important to deconfederize. For those of you as white folks that are in this movement, are watching this black radical tradition, we are demanding that you tell the truth. Dishonest stories. This is why they had to burn Timbuktu, because they knew we had truth in our books and how we had built the Egyptian pyramids and everything. And so y'all have this racism about the Civil War. You're still trying to carry it on and say that these people who even went into January 6th into the Capitol are good people, possibly, when they are the police and they did do something. And to de-confederate means tell the truth on what happened and let the book show, and to change the law and let HR 40 pass. But in the meantime, going to what Yaya says, all right, she is saying that we need to do just what we need to do for ourselves for reparations. And that means not waiting for you all. Our next generations is like, we're going to get ours because we are our ancestors' wildest dreams. We are resilient. And so with this piece that I'm going to show next on the screen, and I'm just so proud of you, Yaya, for just saying, you just set it up. You didn't even know, how to set it up for me, but you set it up on this next piece. And this next piece, y'all, and I say y'all on purpose, is that we as a people, while we're pushing to get reparations and pushing for the Biden administration to do this and pushing for the states and the senators to do all this, there's a piece we're missing. And that's, how do we come together, like Yaya is saying, cooperatively, in cooperation, building the beloved community, building those villages in Africa that we left. Are we really doing that by calling the senators every day, by going and putting these legislations? Not to say that's not important, right? Because I don't want to hear that. Some of y'all going to be doing that, but that's not what everyone's supposed to do. The other piece is, and I'm very clear about this, I really don't think any of that really should be done until we do this piece. And that is come back to the village where the elders and the young people, which were warriors, were at the village together. We don't have a 9-to-5 job, a 9-to-5 nonprofit where we all come to, right? Because we all work different jobs, different unions, whatever, cooperatives even. But this whole thing, and here it is here, our current narratives and institutions fuel something called Black disposability politics. And it addresses anti-Blackness. And it is, we got to get out of it. And so when anti-Blackness, I'm going to read a little bit of this, Yaya, if that's okay. All right, thank you for reading most, but I'm going to read this part because I want to hit on some things, because we have about 10 minutes and we're going to end on a good way. On the heels of Ahmaud Arbery, as it says, and Breonna Taylor's deaths, and right before George Floyd, Christian Cooper and an outburst of protest across our nation had the opportunity to moderate a conversation about racism in America with a historian whom I like. He's the next New York Times bestseller author, Dr. Ibram Kendi. And so this is the article by Ann Price, the president of Insight Center for Community Economic Development. But it goes into this. The irony does not escape me, she says. Kendi notes that it is just devastating to know that on one hand, we are being disproportionately infected and killed by the virus, right? That's exactly what Yaya was talking about. How many bodies have been talked about? Where are those bodies, right? What are they doing with those bodies? And that on the other hand, we're disproportionately infected and killed by the virus of racism, right? So if we're not being killed in the hospital room, we're being killed right now by racism. And amid a pandemic that claims the lives of over 21,000 Black people at a rate of nearly 2 times greater than would be expected based on their share of the population, the events of the past week has exposed the many ways in which Black people are seen as a threat to white Americans and are policed to keep us in a place of servitude and control. And y'all know what Yaya said. She said it's time for us to come out of it, to come together in cooperative. But we're going to get to that. I'm putting a little a thing in to you, Yaya, on what you were saying. But, it's important. So there is a little question that the police are a tool used to keep Black people and people in check. And that is this. Ahmaud Arbery was chased down by two white vigilantes and viciously murdered by former policemen for jogging in his neighborhood. In the Central Park, the white woman weaponized her racist power and expose the ugly persistence of centuries old idea that white woman, right, white womanhood, which is why Tulsa started. This white girl was in the elevator with the boy, and she got scared and they heard her scream, and that is why the Tulsa, Oklahoma thing happened, right? So the white woman must be protected, right? And that's the same reason why people are all Facebooking and twicking. Anytime a white woman says something in calls, right? It's an idea that there has long been used a justification for racist violence against us, Black African people, and particularly Black men. And so she called 911, the Central Park lady, on a Black man who asked her to leash her dog and made a false accusation about him as a dangerous pet. Now, on the same day, George Floyd was brutally killed by the Minneapolis police over a report of a $20 counterfeit bill. We have seen this all before, and we will see it again and again and again unless we choose to stop it. And it is time we consider proposals that defund the police and implement community alternatives to policing. That's just the bottom line. We're defunding the police. And so that's the piece that we do, for legislation and in our communities, right? That's a part of it. But the COVID has exposed how many criminal legal systems, a lack of access to quality health care, an economy that is propped up by unchecked corporate power as a mutually reinforcing. But as the pandemic continues to unfold, we are getting a front row seat to a mainstay of American history. The devaluation and the disposability of Black life. Disposable, which is exactly going back to something we already knew. We always talk about Sankofa in this It Is Our Duty virtual broadcast, and that means disposability. Sankofa says nothing's new. To know that slavery is what we were chattel. It's going back to that. If our society can dehumanize and devalue Black people, it can just as easily rationalize their marginalized existence and even their deaths, which is why when the president and the Black woman, half Black woman, she's Indian and Black, which makes her actually all Black, right? Because she's Black. She got a little blood in her, she's Black, says there's no racism. What they are saying is that they're dehumanizing and devaluing the Black people. It can just be easily rationalized and marginalize their existence and even their deaths. From these reports, though, that some Black people who exhibit COVID-19 symptoms are being denied medical treatment and sent home without testing, to their overrepresentation in jobs that put them at a greater risk of exposure to the virus and represent some of the most devalued work, the failure of government, decision makers to protect the lives of Black people, whether it is from deadly virus or the violence of police. We have been dying, either one. It has become painfully clear. And so, this is not that long, so I'm going to finish it up. Recognizing the gravity of this moment, we can no longer shy away from the naming of the role that racism, specifically anti-Blackness. Yaya, can you say anti-Blackness?
Anti-Blackness.
I wanted to just get you back. And it plays in shaping in life outcomes. And so we must not only amplify the structural inequalities at work and their underlying root causes, but also to work together across the issue and tackle inequities at the intersection. We must hold fast the rejecting narratives that place the blame on Black people, placing the blame on Black people for their illness and their deaths based on the bad habits and the poor decisions and the perceived criminality. Meaning, because we are traumatized by all of this, you want to blame us. It's our fault. This is what they're trying to say, right? So these narratives provide a rationale for both disinvesting in Black people and the communities, and also for punitive policies. The scholar that is mentioned here, Weaver, points out that Black criminality is one of the most enduring racial stereotypes, one of the central justifications of Black exclusion, and the Black citizenship has always been bound by claims of criminality. Racist ideas that Black people in the face of a health crisis are not without historic precedent. So even in 1918, When the pandemic hit in Chicago, 1918, y'all, Black health officials and journalists blamed Black people then for the outbreak, right? They not only characterized Black people as biologically inferior and their neighbors as disease ridden, but also placed responsibility on Black people on the racial antagonism towards themselves. The narratives and stories that begin to take about Black people today will significantly impact how policy solutions are shaped and implemented in recovery. We must work in coalition, right, to focus on narrative change with an intentional focus on countering anti-Blackness. So what I'm saying, like Yaya is saying, this is intentional community we're building. Our focus is countering anti-Blackness by being around us, by coming together as Black people, by bringing together a solution that our ancestors had in Africa called villages, which they call in Brazil quilombos, which they call in uh, in maroon villages in Jamaica, Acapone village, what they called in Cuba Pilinques. So anti-Blackness is something that they have to work on, but we must continue to work on learning to come together, to stop this whole thing of non-trusting, because we have not seen the reparations. And yes, there's going to be fights for it and we will continue. But in that meantime, we need to build ourselves together on land. We need to know that we have cooks like Yehudith, myself, who's ready to work with the children, for us to build together and talk about this stuff in a place where we're not isolated like we were during COVID, where elders were sitting by themselves and others. And this last part, I'm going to just read. The reality of this moment of the pain and deep injustice on display is almost too much to bear. We must persist in following action with investment and lasting systemic change. And we must imagine America anew. We are imagining America anew, building a new and a better future for people and all Americans. And that includes Native Americans. But, I think the truth is, when we look at our other people, like Yaya said, Chinese have Chinatown, right? The Native Americans came together and they stayed together. When my brothers and sisters, my Mexicans come together, they live 20 deep in a house, So this is the thing. How is it, even with our trauma, we cannot see that we need to go back to that idea of villages? And so I'm going to give Yaya the last 2 minutes on our stage here, but I had to read that article. So Yehuda, close us out. You got the floor, sweetie.
Okay. I'm sorry if I held up too much time for the call.
No.
Thoughts. Yes. So once again, thank you for having me. And this is a topic that I love. So it was great to be able to discuss it with you. And you know, this has been going on for over 100 years now. Miss Olivia Hooker was 103 just 2 years ago, right? So, like you were saying, this is not something that is just recently happening. Like, oh, it was 1921 that that happened. Oh, we forgot. Like, no, like we are in the midst of it, and this COVID crisis that we are facing is not only allegedly being uh, wrongly documented, but also it's possible that even if we are getting the COVID, that we're not being helped to avoid the crisis. We're getting stimulus checks and payments and things like that, but they're not really helping to save our lives. And there's no reason to expect that they would, or they would want to. So I'm gonna just be quick in saying that I hope that we can come together to make sure that we outlast this, and that we take care of each other's health, and we educate ourselves, and just stay together in that way.
Yes. Yes. And so on that note, as we always do, Yaya, if we can see your fist, that's the first thing we would love. And we say it all together because that's how we're not here. Unfortunately, 5,025,600 minutes. We can't do that, unfortunately. And we can't be here 24/7, 365 days in the year. But We are here for 52 weeks on Sundays, and we say it is our duty to fight for freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love and protect each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains. So
Hmm.
thank you for coming out again to the segment weekly, right here, the Black Radical Tradition, Political Education, for It Is Our Duty. Thank you, everyone.
God bless.
God bless.